Hey, I thought Jacob did a wonderful job last week. In fact, he's done a wonderful job every week. You really, now take it easy over there, okay? But you know, in his sermon, he said something that really caught my attention. He said, don't pretend to love. Don't pretend to love. And I immediately recognized that as coming from one of my favorite all-time scriptures. And it's found in 1 John chapter 3, verse 18. You don't have to turn there. I'm going to read it to you. It says, my little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Now let me unpack that a little bit. If we are going to love in deed, a deed is an observable act. So that means to love in deed, we're going to have to do something for someone, not just feel something for someone. And then to do it in truth speaks of sincerity of heart. We do it without ulterior motives. We don't do it to gain something back. We do it freely out of love, a sincere love for them. I like the way it's stated in the Message. He says, my dear children, let us not just talk about love. Let us practice real love. There is in our New Testament 3 words from the Greek New Testament that are translated love in our English Bibles. There are other words translated love, but these are the 3 primary words. The first one is eros, from which the word erotic comes from. And so you can imagine that it's speaking of a sensual love. One that's pure before the Lord, though, not one that's worldly. It's like the love of a husband for his wife. And then there's Phileo, which is a friendly sort of love. You have dear friends, and I'm sure you love your dear friends, and that's a Phileo type of love. And then lastly, there's agape. And as you well know, because we've covered it before, agape is a godly love. It's a love that is always giving, never seeking anything in return. The Word tells us that God is love. That's His essence. He's a God who constantly gives. And so the title of my message this morning is simply Love. I want to talk to you about love. So I'm going to ask you to turn in your Bible, or as Jacob says, your iPhone, your iPad, whatever you use. Turn to Matthew 22. And then if you're using an iPad or an iPhone, this is going to be a little hard because I want you to stick your finger in there. Are you going to be able to do that? And then turn to Galatians chapter 6. Okay, so we've got Matthew chapter 22 and Galatians chapter 6. Now, while you're turning there and getting settled in, I want to read to you from Mark chapter 2. And this is what it says. And again, he entered Capernaum, speaking of Jesus, after some days, and it was heard that he was in the house. And immediately many gathered together, so that there was no longer room to receive them, not even near the door. And he preached the word to them. Then they came to him, bringing a paralytic who was carried by 4 men. And when they could not come near him because of the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. So when they had broken through, they let down the bed on which the paralytic was lying. And if you know the story, you know that Jesus commended them for their faith, and he healed the man. Now, there's also kind of a tit for tat, a back and forth between Jesus and the religious leaders at that time, but basically he healed the man because of his faith. Okay? So let's look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. I read you that story because it's an illustration, a beautiful biblical illustration of what we're told in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. There it says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Let me read that again. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. The law of Christ. The law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? Okay, now let's flip to the Matthew 22. Matthew 22, we're going to look at verse 37. And in this passage, we're going to find out what the law of Christ is pertaining to love. It reads, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now remember, when Jesus came on the scene and began to teach the kingdom of God, he turned everything upside down. Because instead of teaching the law, he was teaching the new kingdom of God. And we know that in the new kingdom of God, he taught that love is agape, and it's a love that serves. He told his disciples when he was about to leave, he said, by this they will know that you are my disciples. Well, what's the this he was talking about? It goes on, if you have love one for another. So what Jesus was saying was, by your acts of love one for another, people are going to know that you're my disciples. They're going to see me in you. And you are going to glorify God by sharing the love of God. Matthew 5, verse 1. It says, Jesus changed their previous understanding of the law by preaching the kingdom of God. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 13, it says this, through love, serve one another. Through love, serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I want to share with you this morning some characteristics that I see are sorely missing from today's society. And the first one I will say is that love is not selfish. It seems today that so many people only look out for themselves. They're only concerned about their own needs. In fact, a lot of times, if they happen to see a person that has a need, they'll pretend like they don't see, or they'll turn their head and just move on past that person. They hardly ever stop to help because they're so concerned with their own things. You know, back in the day when Susie and I were fairly new Christians in Salinas, in a small group of people that met in a YMCA building, there was a member of our group whose name was David McKenzie. And David was quite often late. I mean, he was frequently late. But the thing we knew about David when he was late was he was late because he was helping someone. On his way to church, something would appear to him, and he would stop and help. So when we were together at the assembly and someone would say, well, where's David? The response normally was, well, he probably stopped to change a tire for somebody. Because that's just the way David was. That is so much like Jesus and how he desires us to live. You know, even Christians don't always take the time to stop and help. We read a story in Luke chapter 10. It's called the Good Samaritan. And what it is a criticism of the religious people. Because in that story, we discover that a priest and a Levite, these were the religious people of that day, saw the man down in the ditch and bloodied, and they walked right past him and didn't do a thing. And the man that was least likely to stop and help was a Samaritan. Remember, the Samaritans were considered half-breeds. They weren't Jews, and they were looked down on. They were persecuted all the time. And yet it was a Samaritan who stopped and bound the wounds of the injured man. Not only ministered aid to him, but put him on his animal and took him to the closest inn. Left him there, but told the innkeeper, take good care of him. And whatever the cost is, I will repay you every cent when I come back through here. What a remarkable illustration of someone who is not a religious person. Someone who, as we would say it today, didn't know the Lord. And I'm reminded of what Paul says in Romans chapter 2 at verse 14. And here's an indictment. It says this: when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do the things in the law, these, although not having the law, are a law to themselves. In other words, what Paul is saying is they're the ones, even though they're not Christians, they behave like Christians. They model Jesus, even though they don't live under the laws of the kingdom of God. Excuse me. You know, during our illness, Susie and I had so many people that were a part of this church and others who had been friends of ours for some time, who came to our aid. They provided things that were needed, medicine, food, different things that we truly needed. And they were so lovingly gracious to drop those things by to us. I'm thankful that here at Park Community Church, we have a ministry called Family Care. And Family Care is staffed by some wonderful people. I say wonderful because they are people that really have a loving servant's heart. Were they not equipped with a loving servant's heart, they wouldn't be in that ministry, because that's what those people do. They serve others, expecting nothing in return, but serving them out of the agape love of Christ that resides in our hearts. I really wonder how people make it in life today who aren't members of a loving church. And oftentimes they'll come by here and they'll ask for help. And to the measure that we as a small church are able to help, we do help. Because there again, it's an expression of the love of Christ. But I've often wondered about the people who don't have a church and who go through things like a lost job or a serious illness. I mean, how do they get by? I really don't know. You know, there's a saying that it's better to give than to receive. You all familiar with that? You've probably heard it 100 times, right? Well, let me tell you, not only is it better, it's fun. It's fun to give. It truly is. Once again, back in the day, way back over 30 years ago, when Susie and I were fairly new Christians and a member of a small group, I can tell this story now because it's so old. My wife sometimes warns me, don't boast about things that you've done. And when I share those things, I'm not boasting. I'm just giving a testimony to what God has done through me, which I am totally blessed that he chose me to do it. So I am not boasting here, but we were a part of a small group back in the day at that time. And a guitar player on our worship team lost his job. For no fault of his own, he just lost his job. And so there was a group of us that were together one night, and we were talking about our church because it was new church. We were pioneering something that didn't exist before, and it was exciting. And so we're talking about the church, and next thing you know, this couple came up, and we were talking about them. And somebody said, you know what we ought to do? What? So we went down to the local grocery store, got a couple of shopping carts, and went up and down each aisle. Oh, I bet they'd like that. Oh, you know they're going to need milk. And so we laid in all the staples and all the other things that we believed this young couple would want, that they would enjoy, that would be a normal fare for them. Of course, we threw in some candy too. I mean, you got to have some candy. But then we drove over to their house, and we parked about a half a block away, close enough where we could creep up with our bags, and we put them on the front porch. And then we rang the doorbell and ran like the dickens. And we ran down to our cars, but where we could still see them. And of course, they came out on the front porch and didn't see anyone, and they looked down, and here were all these groceries. And we watched them as they picked them up and carried them into the house. Of course, a couple days later, we saw them at church. Nobody said a word. Nobody's ever said a word. I'm telling you about it today, but that was over 30 years ago. We were just so blessed. I'll tell you what, after we did that, we went back to where we were before we went to that store. And I'll tell you, I bet we glowed. Honestly, I just bet we glowed by the love of God that we had just demonstrated. It was a wonderful thing. It was fun. It truly was fun. You know this story about the paralytic on the stretcher and the 4 men who carried him, and when they couldn't get in, went up on the roof and removed the tiles. They went the extra mile to get the person they carried before Jesus. And Jesus saw their faith, and Jesus healed the man. Have you ever thought about what it was like for those 4 men as they were walking home? Have you ever thought about what was going on in their hearts and minds as they were walking home? Who was the guy on the litter? Was he a relative, a friend, an acquaintance? Who was he? We don't know. How far did they have to go to get to the house where Jesus was? We don't know. But it required labor. It was an act of love, and they carried him to Jesus, and Jesus healed him. Don't you know that they were as happy as we were when we were running to our cars after leaving those groceries? You know, giving is fun. You think, well, I can't give. I don't have enough. You will never have enough if you're not a giver. There's a principle in the Bible, sowing and reaping. And as you sow, you will reap. And so those people that just hoard stuff and don't give freely, they're miserable people. And they never really have in abundance because they are violating God's principle of sowing and reaping. Amen. So give. Give freely. Give liberally and enjoy what that brings to your life. Not only in the joy of knowing that you're pleasing the Lord and blessing others, but wait and see what God provides you. There's a song, keep on casting your bread on the water, and soon it's going to come back to you. That's exactly what will happen if you honor that principle, biblical principle of giving. So the first thing that troubles me about society today is that the love that I oftentimes see is selfish. First of all, there's a major lack of love that's demonstrated in today's society. The second thing I want to point out to you is that love is not discriminatory. Love is not, using a very common word today, love is not racist. You see, the Jews hated Samaritans. They would have nothing to do with them. They went out of their way to avoid a Samaritan. For example, if they were walking down the same sidewalk, the Jew would move to the other side of the street. That's how bad they hated them. If they had to travel to a distance, and Samaria was between Jerusalem and where they were going, they went out of their way to avoid Samaria. They didn't want to have anything to do with these people. And yet Jesus purposefully went to Samaria. Not only did he go to Samaria, but while he was there, he had a conversation with a woman. Jewish men don't speak to women, and especially a Samaritan woman. That's why she was so amazed. She says, how is it that you, being a Jew, are asking me for a drink of water? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. And they didn't. But Jesus, he broke through this discrimination. He broke through the racial barriers. He broke through and he shared love with everybody, unconditionally, no matter who they were, no matter of what race they were of or where they came from. Amen. You know, today we have groups in our society, BLM, Black Lives Matter, Antifa. We have progressive socialists, and all of these people are working together to remodel America. And what they desire is not something that we're going to like. And that's why we have to stand against it. But they're at work to change America, and it's real easy to find it in your heart, to find it in my heart, to dislike those people. I turn on the TV, I see the riots, I see them abusing people, beating people up, throwing fire bombs into buildings. Susie and I were talking yesterday about how people now in San Francisco are just walking into drugstores and loading up their arms and just walking out, and nobody says anything. They just walk out. That's the society that we live in today. And it's easy for me, even as a Christian and with a deep love for the Lord, it's easy for me to begin to find that I have issue with these people and that I have angst in my heart towards them. You know, I don't know how you grew up, but some of us, and not me, praise God, but I've talked to some that grew up in the South with white parents, and they were taught, and it was demonstrated by their parents to hate black people. Many thought that black people were cursed of God. And so they grew up in that. And they think that today. Imagine becoming a Christian and realizing red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in His sight. And then you have to seek the Holy Spirit and say, God, I know that's wrong. I don't want that in there. Get it out of there. Work it out of me. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while because you're just trained when you see a black person that feelings just kind of go off in you. And God wants to change all that. Amen. He doesn't want you to discriminate with his love. You see, Jesus was compelled to go where others wouldn't go. I think of today's missionaries. Man, they have a heart for missions. Well, in order to have a heart for missions, you have to have a heart for unsaved people. Not only that, but you have to have a heart for unsaved people that maybe live in strange places that you wouldn't normally desire to go to. But because you have the heart of a missionary, you are drawn to these people and you obey the leading of the Lord and you go. Jesus was known to hang around with sinners and even eat with some of the religious people. And he was criticized for that. People chided him and said bad things about him for doing that. But he modeled that for us. You see, Jesus, when he left, didn't call his disciples out of the world. He sent them in. And he wants to send us in today. And so I really have to ask myself, how many unsaved friends do I have? How many unsaved people do I hang with? Do I get together from time to time? And if they're not willing to hear my testimony about Christ, at least I can witness to them by my life. But the question is, how many unsaved friends do I hang around with? You know what we find today? You already know what I'm going to say before I say it. Christians hang with Christians. We're comfortable with them. We get around unsaved people and we're on edge. We're not comfortable. They're different than us. But you see, those are the people that Jesus sent us to. He sent us to those people so that they could see him in us and hopefully be drawn to it. There's this ministry called Doctors Without Borders. These are guys, medical doctors and nurses who are well-trained. They could make thousands and thousands of dollars here in the United States, but they have committed themselves to missionary work, and they go into places that you wouldn't want to go into. They'll go into places that are infested with disease. And yet, without even thinking about their own welfare, they go there to serve the needs of others, to treat those people, and to help them become well. Boy, my hat's off to those guys, those men and women. They have a pure heart, an agape heart, to share the love of Jesus and to do it medically and through the things that they're trained to do. So love, Jesus' love doesn't discriminate. He loves everyone. He wants us to love everyone. Third, Jesus' love is not judgmental. It's not judgmental. In Matthew 5 at verse 43, and again, this is part of the new kingdom principles that he was teaching to all these people. He says, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. And Jesus said, no, we have to love our enemies. In fact, if somebody slaps you on the cheek, turn the other to them. Man, those people are hard to love. People that have sued you or people that have done wrong against you. And All of us have experienced wrongdoing. People have just done some dirty things, to many of us. And yet we're commanded by Jesus to love those people. Shoot, I want to write them off. I don't want to have anything to do with them. But Jesus says you can't do that. You got to love them. Oh, well, Jesus, I'll just love the ones that are easy to love. You know, those that are easy to love. And he goes, no, you can't do that. Well, if I can't love them, Lord, I'll try my best to like them. How about that, Lord? Is that good enough? No, not quite good enough. You see, agape love is indivisible. You can't divide it up and say, love members of the church, but I don't like these people over here. I don't love these people. Agape love loves everybody. It loves everybody the same. It has no favorites. As stated previously, Galatians 5:13 says, for you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only don't use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the love is fulfilled in one word, even this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love one another. Jesus said to his disciples, he says, well, no, it's actually in 1 John, but Jesus said it too, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Love people as Jesus loves me. That's a tall order. But with the help of the Holy Spirit, I hope I can do it in a way that's pleasing to the Lord. I want to ask you a question. How will your neighbors ever know that you're a Christian? Will they one day look out their windows and see you helping to carry a lame man on a stretcher? How will they know? You see, that is the this, whatever it is, that will testify to them that you are a believer. I share a poem with you once in a while. It goes like this. I am my neighbor's Bible. He reads me when we meet. Today he reads me in my home. Tomorrow in the street. He may be relative or friend or slight acquaintance be. He may not even know my name, but he is reading me. People are watching you daily. My last point, and this is vitally important. This is key to success in loving the way God loves. In order to love like this, you've got to guard your heart. Guard your heart. Don't let things creep in and take residency that begin to distance you from others or begin to have ill feelings towards others. You know, I turn on the news. I try to stay abreast of the news because as your leader, I kind of want to know what's going on in the world so that I can warn you of things that I need to warn you about, that I can rejoice with you over things that are worthy of our rejoicing. But you know what I find? The news just bums me out. It just truly bums me out. Susie knows it. She senses it. It just truly bums me. I mean, You're going to hear about politics. You're going to hear about border issues. You're going to hear about how lame Biden is. You're going to hear about the COVID statistics and the mandates to get vaccinated and everything. Man, those things just really bum me out. I recently removed Facebook from all my devices. My computers, my iPad, and my iPhone. I told all my friends, and I got a bunch of them out there, because I've been on there for years. I said, I can't do it anymore. This is affecting me emotionally and cognitively. I'm discontinuing. I said, if you want to contact me, here's my email address. And so I shot it out there for all to see. And I canceled that from my devices because I go on Facebook and I read all that same stuff. And it just truly bums me out. Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. The Message Bible says this, keep vigilant watch over your heart. That's where life starts. So what you have in your heart is going to come out. So I say, Father, give me a little more love of Jesus. Just pour the love of Jesus into my heart. Just fill it up, Lord, so that it can come out. Don't let things fester in your heart. Guard it. I want to close with the words of Paul. He says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, if the worship team wants to come up, he says, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. And then you read down a little farther, and it says this, and now abide faith, hope, and love. These three, but the greatest of these is love. Let's vow daily to bear one another's burdens, not only to fulfill the law of Christ, but just to exemplify Christ in the world today for all to see. Let's trim the wick of the lamp of our lives every morning and ask God to light us up, to shine brightly in this darkened world. Amen? Let's pray. Father, we thank you that it's by your Spirit that we're able to do the things that you command us in Scripture. We're well aware that without your help, we wouldn't be able to do this. We couldn't come close. But we're thankful, Lord, that you give us everything we need to obey everything that you ask. And even this morning, Lord, You're working in our hearts. You're revealing your eternal word, your word of life. And you're feeding us to grow strong in our knowledge of you and your will for each one of us. Father, I pray for those who sit before me this morning. I pray that each and every one of them would be alive by your Spirit and full of your grace. And Lord, for whatever needs that carried into this room this morning, as we prayed earlier, I pray again, please meet those needs in a way that they will know that they have met God today and that He has touched them in an area where they needed to be touched. Father, we praise and thank you for the life that you've given us. Strengthen us each day to glorify you and to be pleasing sons and daughters. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.